just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wadandi people of the Noongar Nation, and we pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging. I've declared that it's open and thank you. Just also like to advise that the meeting today is being digitally recorded in accordance with Council Policy EMCP2, and to remind all members of the public that there is to be no visual or audio recording of this meeting by any other means is allowed without the permission of the chairperson, which is myself. This special meeting of council is called today under section 5.4 subsection AI under the Local Government Act 1995. It was actually called by myself for the purposes of receiving the annual financial report and audit report for the year ended 30th of June 2021. We also received the 2021 Shire of Donnybrook Balingup annual report, and we also will be setting the date for the annual general meeting of electors. Moving along to item 2.1, apologies. I believe we have an apology from Councillor Goobler. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mrs. President. Yes, that's correct. Councillor Goobler has emailed in an apology for this meeting.
Do we have any approved leave of absences? No. Do we have any applications for a leave of absence? No. Announcements from presiding members or councillors, if you have something of interest to share for this special council meeting. I don't have any announcements for the special council meeting. Moving on to declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening?
Sorry, Mrs. President. No, I have not received any.
Thank you. Item 5, public question time. Do we have any questions from the public gallery? Mr. McGuinness, you're first in the queue.
Thank you. Is this on? Is that on? Okay, it's going. Is it going now? Yeah, drop the mic. It says here on the asset renewal funding ratio that you've done all the necessary planning complete to have a sufficient level to inform the development of the calculation of the asset renewal funding ratio. But the reason it hasn't been done is because the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries is under direction of the Minister, has recently released a draft model of financial statements. Now, has that actually been through Parliament yet?
Thank you for the question, Mr. McGuinness. I don't believe it has, but I will check with the CEO.
Thank you, Madam President. I might just refer to Mr. Dolzadelli on that one.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. CEO. And thank you for the question, Mr. McGuinness. The actual commentary in the actual item says that all the necessary asset management planning is complete to a sufficient level to inform the development of the calculation of the asset renewal funding ratio. This, however, needs to be embedded into the long-term financial plan. Now, that hasn't been done in the latest or the most current long-term financial plan, and that is why we're unable to calculate the ratio. The Office of the Auditor General will not accept numbers that are contained within the asset management plan. For the calculation, they must be embedded in the long-term financial plan.
Okay, so that was December 2020 that was done. I'm just saying it was 18 months ago.
Correct, Mr. McGuinness. That is the current adopted long-term financial plan. Staff are currently working on the review of the plan, and it is intended that the necessary information that is in the asset management plans will be transferred to the long-term financial plans. The core of the issue is that the long-term financial plan does not separate new capital expenditure or capital expenditure on new items compared to upgraded items, compared to renewed items. And the crucial one is the renewed items. We can't compare or calculate a ratio which is all about renewal of assets unless we actually have that separation of the type of expenditure that's occurring.
So when is that going to be done? Because it's been 18 months now.
Mr McGuinness, I refer you to my last comment, which was staff are currently reviewing the long-term financial plan.
Do we have a time frame?
We intend to have the long-term financial plan, the reviewed long-term financial plan, to council by no later than May this year.
May this year. And the reason for the bottom half is, well, that simply doesn't exist because it hasn't been through Parliament yet, so that's not right. Okay. And
If I may, Mr McGuinness, it doesn't
yeah,
say that it's been through Parliament. It's saying that there is a review and that within that review, the contents of what I have in this report is fact. It's in the review. I'm not saying that it's legislative.
so if it doesn't,
Is there any other questions that you might have?
yeah, there is one. It's about, oh, I'll just find it here. Sorry about this. There we go. For the operating surplus ratio, has been impacted by the non-cash depreciation charges. The same reason for not following this through, I'm paraphrasing it, is because of this review by the state government, which hasn't been through Parliament yet and become law, so it doesn't exist. I'm just wondering,
What's your question?
the Shire's operating surplus ratio hasn't been given to the auditor, has it?
Yes, it has been, and it has been calculated.
It has been calculated. So when will the
Yes.
full review of the depreciation calculation be done? Because it's pending on the local government reform, which doesn't exist at the moment, because it hasn't been through Parliament. That's what I'm saying.
The
If depreciation, you said at the last meeting, depreciation doesn't affect the bottom line. I'm wondering why you're going to all the trouble.
So that's your question, is it?
My question is the methodologies of calculating the operating surplus, the depreciation is now currently under review. I was wondering, why are we going through all this trouble to review the depreciation when it doesn't affect the bottom line?
Mr McGuinness, it doesn't affect our cash bottom line position in any way or sense. But what it does do is it impacts on ratios such as this particular ratio. The statement in terms of, and I'll just read it.
Page 6.
So there is a lot of work in terms of a review of depreciation and the methodologies. It's not just a flick of a switch, and it's certainly not a 1 day or 5 day exercise. So my comment there is that pending the final outcome of the local government reform, officers will undertake a review of depreciation calculation and methodologies. In saying that, if it's going to make no difference, then I would prefer not to invest time in reviewing those methodologies. If it were to make a difference, if the actual ratio itself, or if depreciation impacts any new ratios that may be placed upon local government, then certainly we would undertake the review. But I am reticent to place resources on an issue that may or may not have any impact to the Shire at all.
Okay, may or may not's the key there. Why can't we use the current formula?
This is your last question.
It is. I've got a job to do.
We can.
Why haven't we? When I go through the financials,
We have.
when I go through the financials, all the depreciation has 0, 0, 0 on all the financial things.
Mr McGuinness, we're discussing the annual financial statements for the year of 2020-21. What you're looking at and what you're discussing at the moment is the current financial year, which is not the year under audit.
Okay.
The reason that the zeros are currently appearing in the monthly financial statements being presented to council is we cannot close off our asset register until the finalisation of the annual audit for 2021, the prior year, and the issue of the audit opinion from the Auditor General themselves. So what you'll find is in the March meeting of council, the ordinary council meeting, you will find that there is depreciation numbers being presented in those reports.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, the Director of Corporate Community, for answering those questions, and thank you for your questions, Mr McGuinness, and enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, we're moving on now. We're moving on to item 6.1, Annual Financial Statements and Audit Opinion 2021. Can I have we've got an executive recommendation here. I'll skip one. Yes, okay, it's the Audit and Risk Management Committee recommendation, not the executive recommendation, as I said. So the Audit and Risk Management Committee recommendation is that Council, 1, receive the annual financial report and audit report for the year ended 30th of June 2021, and 2, forward to the Minister for Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries the report on significant findings as attached for the year ended 30th of June 2021 as required by section 7.12a subsection 4b of the Local Government Act 1995. Do I have a mover? Councillor Glover, mover. Seconder? Councillor Atherton? Councillor Glover, would you like to speak as a mover?
I hope I've got this right. I'm not sure. I'm trying to keep up with all of this as well. But this was in response to the audit that occurred late last year, and with the exit meeting that we went to, and with regard to what the responses were with regard to the audit findings. Okay. So I just wanted to ask. I'm asking a question that
you're speaking to the motion.
Speaking to the motion, yep. So I'm just with regard to that. I was the ratio, the operating.
Not questions at the moment. Sorry, just speaking to the motion. If you can speak to the motion, then I'll go to the seconder, and then we'll ask questions.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I'm saying that yes, we've received it, and thank you very much for the work that's gone in with your recommendations.
Thank you. The seconder, Councillor Atherton, would you like to speak to the motion? You reserve your right. Now, any questions? Councillor Glover.
I predicted what was going to happen. Okay, so I'm just looking at the first one with regard to the significant adverse trends about the financial position of the Shire with regard to the operating surplus ratio. And looking at obviously the non-cash depreciation changes, and I note that there's been a table that's drawing upon, and perhaps you just answered this, but drawing upon the 2019/2020 ratios for depreciation. And I'm wondering if we were to look at making changes and reducing the depreciation ratio, will that be a oh no, sorry. Will that be something that comes through to us councillors to approve of, or is it just we take a hold of the recommendation that you've put through, or do you put through the recommendation and we approve that as council in the future?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Glover. The actual purpose of this actual item is to approve the annual financial report and the audit report as is at the 30th of June. Your question is referring to what we do moving forward in relation to the depreciation rates. Is that correct?
It was with regard to the recommendations, the management recommendations that have been put through, the responses.
Okay.
That's around my question with that, because obviously the audit went through, there were some things highlighted in the report,
Yep.
and then we've had some responses that have come back as a result of that, and
Okay.
I'm just kind
So
of querying
chasing up the action from that.
The actions that we're going to do.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it on to the CEO.
Who will pass it to Mr Dolsdale. Thank you. Director, Corporate and Community, Mr Dolsdale.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr CEO, and thank you, Councillor Glover, for the question. Look, depreciation at the end of the day, it forms part of our budget regardless, and therefore any work that is done in terms of looking at the disaggregation of assets to introduce new methodology into our treatment of depreciation. Look, we'd take a officer review of that, and then what I would expect is that we would hold probably a short workshop. Shouldn't be that intense, discussing the results of that review, and then we would seek a budget amendment from council to change the methodology and adopt new outcomes in terms of the actual rates of depreciation if it's outside a normal budget cycle. So if it's within a budget cycle, so for example, if the work were to be done and presented in the 22-23 budget, that would be the point in time where council would actually have a say in terms of does this get adopted, does it not? And certainly with that process, it wouldn't be a case of coming to council with a officer's complete draft budget and saying please adopt this. We'd certainly hold workshops, etc. on that throughout that process.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Is there any other questions before Councillor Glover asks another one? No, Councillor Glover,
So with regard to the management response, you drew up a table from the 2019-2020 depreciation of non-current assets. Is there any reason why we looked at that year and not the 2020? The next year, so 2021 year and the 20, is that, because it's a year late, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Through the President, thank you, Councillor Glover. Yes, indeed, there is a reason, and that reason is that councils hadn't submitted their annual financial statements for 2021, so the data wasn't actually available. Just as our final audit's only, not long been signed off, there are other councils within Western Australia who still haven't had sign off on their audits. So the only year that I could really use, the most current year, was 2019-20.
Now, are there any other questions? Is there anyone against this motion? Okay, sorry, Councillor Newman, did you have something to say? No? Okay,
He was fixing his strap to his ear.
oh. Okay, I'll refer that to Councillor Glover. You've got the right of reply because you're the mover. So if you'd like to, before we take it to the vote.
No further comment, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry? Well, I'll put it to the vote now. So,
Speakers against, you can carry it.
okay, well, I will carry it then, if there's no speakers against. Carried. And can you please turn your phone off, please? Thank you. Okay, we're actually moving on to 6.1.2, 2021 Annual Report. Recommendation that Council approve the annual report for the year ended 30th of June 2021 as attached. Do we have a mover for this motion? Councillor Atherton, seconded Councillor Massey. Councillor Atherton, would you like to speak to the motion, please? Councillor Atherton reserved his right. Councillor Massey, would you like to speak? Councillor Massey reserved her right. Do we have any questions in regards to this item? I have a question if there's no other questions from the floor. Just in regards to the annual report, I noticed there were 5 freedom of information applications. Were they all different applications from the same? Were they all from different people, those applications, or were they repeat ones from the same applicant?
Thank you, Madam President. Without going into the specific details, there was several repeats within repeat applicants within that 5. There's probably 3 applicants, I think, across 5 requests, something like that.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Are there any other questions? No? Is there anyone against this motion for adopting this annual report? No? Oh, it's carried. Thank you. Moving on to 6.1.3, Annual General Meeting of Electors. The recommendation that Council schedule the Annual General Meeting of Electors for Wednesday, the 30th of March 2022, commencing at 6 p.m. at Station Square. And also to instruct the Chief Executive Officer undertake all statutory advertising. Do I have a mover of this motion? Councillor Jones, seconded Councillor Smith. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Jones reserves his right. Councillor Smith. Councillor Jones reserves his right to speak. Oh, I'm sorry, Smith and Jones. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Do we have any questions now this item is on the floor, so to speak? Yes, Councillor Massey.
I'm just hastily flicking through the item because I have a habit of asking questions that the CEO then finds the answer to direct in there. But when we say Station Square, is that elucidated in here and I've missed it? Because surely we usually have the annual general meeting in the chamber, do we not? Or in the community hall. So what do we mean by Station Square? Is it an outside meeting and I've missed it?
So, thank you very much for the question, Councillor Massey. This was something that we thought long and hard about. We generally have it at the hall, the Memorial Hall, but I believe that you need to be double vaccinated to go to the Memorial Hall, so we thought it was more inclusive if we do it outside, as long as we've got social distancing, and that sort of thing. So we wanted everyone to be inclusive of the whole thing. So, and with COVID restrictions and things like that. The only one point that I'd like to make is that we will be unable to actually record it, I believe. I'll actually pass it over to the CEO if there's anything that I've missed off those details.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Councillor Massey. Yeah, it's in the report. It is only one sentence, but it's on page 15. says, given the evolving COVID-19 situation and challenges with indoor venues, it is recommended that this meeting take place in Station Square, Donnybrook. So after a lengthy consultation with the Shire President, we decided to make a I've decided to make a recommendation that we have an outdoor meeting, which I think is probably the first time we've had an outside AGM. Given the time frame at 6 p.m, we might have some challenges with data projectors and things like that, but we can have lots of hard copy documents available. It just assists the town hall for that meeting questionably requires double vaccination and masks. So as the Shire President mentioned, to be as inclusive and inviting as possible, let's do it outside. The thought is we'll set up chairs on the lawn and the concrete apron out the front of the goods shed. We'll have some tables and PA systems and things set up, some bottles of water, and hopefully people stay for a picnic afterwards.
Yes, Councillor Massey, you have a
I
question?
just wanted to observe, I think it's a great idea. And I have read the item previous, but unfortunately Station Square didn't leap out at me, nor did the final sentence, so my apologies.
Thank you. Councillor Mills, you have a question?
Just a question about the weather. I suppose you've thought about that.
Yes. Thank you for that. We can't predict that, unfortunately. I haven't got a crystal ball, but I'll pass it on to the CEO, see if he's got plan B in that regards.
Thank you, Madam President. It's a question, a similar question was asked by the Shire President of me earlier this morning, not so much about the weather, but about COVID. If we've got escalating community spread, is it wise to have even an outdoor meeting? My advice to the Shire President was we'll watch A, the weather, we'll watch B, well probably A, the COVID cases, and B, the weather, and any other external circumstances. And a week or so out, once we get a longer range weather forecast, we can put in place some other measures. We, under the local government legislation, you can't have, it's not permissible to have an e-meeting for an annual general meeting of electors, and it's not permissible for a special meeting of electors to be electronic either. So I did look at that, but worst case scenario, we'll find another venue and advertise it accordingly.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Mills. Are there any other questions? Okay, we'll go back. The right of reply, that's Councillor Jones. You are the mover, so you have a right of reply, Councillor Jones, if you wish.
No, I think the questions that were brought up by Councillor Mills was a valid one. Obviously, the CEO and Madam President have thought about that, so I presume from that questions will be forwarded by the ratepayers for presentation on the night, will they? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Are there anyone? Well, that's it now. We'll take it to the vote. Take it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. Okay, now comes to the exciting part. That's item 8, closure. Sorry. The Shire President to advise, I'm going to advise you the next Ordinary Council meeting will be held on Wednesday the 23rd of March, which is Wednesday week, at 5 p.m. at the Council Chamber here in Donnybrook. Also, just a reminder that the agenda briefing will be held this Wednesday in 2 days' time at the Currip Hall at 2 o'clock. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you.